I stood in the kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, my heart sinking as my mother's voice chirped through the speaker. "Oh, Emily, it's just a little getaway. 2 weeks in the Bahamas. Your father and I deserve this, don't we? After all these years." Her tone was light, almost flippant, as if she hadn't just dropped a bomb on my carefully laid plans. My son, Ethan, was supposed to stay with them while I traveled for a work conference, a rare opportunity to secure a promotion that could change our lives. I trusted them, counted on them, and now they were bailing. "But Mom," I said, my voice trembling, "you promised Ethan. He's been talking about his week with you and Dad for months." Silence. Then a sigh, laced with impatience. "He'll be fine, Emily. He's 8. He can handle a little disappointment." My grip tightened on the phone, knuckles whitening. A little disappointment. Ethan wasn't just any kid. He was sensitive, still reeling from his father's abandonment 2 years ago. My parents knew that. They knew how much he needed stability, how much he looked forward to their time together. And yet, they'd chosen a beach vacation over him. Over us. I hung up without another word, my chest tight with a mix of betrayal and rage. That was the moment I decided they didn't get to be in our lives anymore, not after this. The next morning, Ethan sat at the breakfast table, his small hands wrapped around a bowl of cereal, his brown eyes wide with confusion. "Why can't I go to Grandma and Grandpa's?" he asked, his voice small. I knelt beside him, forcing a smile. "They had to go somewhere, buddy. But you and I are going to have an adventure instead." His face crumpled, and I felt a stab of guilt for lying, for shielding him from the truth that his grandparents had chosen themselves over him. I'd always protected him from pain, but this time, the wound cut deeper, and it wasn't just his. It was mine, too. My parents had always been selfish in small ways, favoring their comfort, their plans, but this was different. This was a betrayal that burned, a line crossed that I couldn't forgive. I spent the day rearranging my life, canceling my conference trip, calling in favors to cover my absence at work, and booking a last-minute staycation for Ethan and me at a nearby cabin. But as I tucked him into bed that night, his soft snores filling the quiet, my anger grew. They didn't get to walk away unscathed. They didn't get to hurt my son and pretend it was nothing. I sat at my laptop, the screen's glow harsh in the dark. My fingers hovered over the keys, trembling with the weight of what I was about to do. I'd always kept family matters private, but this time, silence felt like complicity. I opened my social media, where our extended family, friends, and neighbors followed me, and began to type. My parents were supposed to watch Ethan while I attended a work conference. Instead, they booked a last-minute vacation to the Bahamas and didn't even tell me until yesterday. Ethan is heartbroken, and so am I. This isn't just a scheduling conflict, it's a choice they made to prioritize themselves over their grandson. I'm done pretending this is okay. I hit post, my heart pounding. Within minutes, notifications flooded in, likes, comments, messages. Some were shocked, others supportive, a few defensive on my parents' behalf. But I didn't care. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The next day, my phone buzzed incessantly. Aunts, cousins, Old family friends, everyone had seen the post. My mother called, her voice shrill with indignation. How dare you air our dirty laundry like that? Emily, you've humiliated us. I let her rant, her words washing over me like static. You humiliated yourselves, I said coldly. You broke Ethan's heart. You don't get to play the victim. I hung up, my hands shaking. My father's text came next. Short and cutting. You're overreacting. Grow up. But I wasn't a child anymore, begging for their approval. I was a mother, and my son came first. Cutting them off wasn't just about punishment, it was about protecting Ethan from people who'd proven they couldn't be trusted. I blocked their numbers, deleted their contacts, and felt a strange mix of relief and grief. They were my parents, but they'd made their choice. Now I was making mine. Days passed, and the fallout spread. My sister, Claire, called, torn between loyalty to our parents and sympathy for me. They're saying you're being dramatic, she said softly. But I get why you're upset. Ethan didn't deserve that. Claire had always been the peacemaker, but even she couldn't bridge this gap. I told her I needed space, not just from Mom and Dad, but from anyone who'd defend them. She didn't argue, but her silence spoke volumes. Meanwhile, Ethan and I settled into the cabin, a cozy retreat with a view of the lake. I tried to make it fun: campfires, board games, stories, but his questions lingered. Do Grandma and Grandpa not love me anymore? He asked one night, his voice barely a whisper. I pulled him close, my heart breaking. They love you, sweetheart. They just made a bad choice. But the words felt hollow. Love wasn't enough if it came with neglect. The cabin became our sanctuary, but my mind was a battlefield. Every night, I replayed my parents' words, their casual dismissal of Ethan's feelings. I thought of all the times I'd excused their behavior: missed birthdays, half-hearted apologies because they were family. But family wasn't supposed to hurt you like this. My post had sparked a firestorm, and while some relatives called to offer support, others whispered about my cruelty in exposing my parents. I didn't care about their judgment. What I cared about was Ethan, and the growing realization that I'd been carrying my parents' baggage my whole life. Their selfishness wasn't new. It was just the first time I'd refused to carry it for them. As the week wore on, I started to notice a shift in Ethan. He laughed more, his eyes brighter as we hiked trails and roasted marshmallows. But I wasn't healing as quickly. My anger was a living thing, coiled tight in my chest. I wanted my parents to feel the weight of what they'd done, to understand the cost of their choices. Posting online had been my first act of defiance. But it wasn't enough. I needed them to see Ethan's pain, to confront the consequences of their actions. I didn't know how, but I knew I wasn't done. Justice, I thought, wasn't just about cutting them off, it was about making them understand. And so, as Ethan slept, I began to plan. The idea came to me in the quiet of the cabin, a spark that grew into a blaze. I'd write a letter not just to my parents, but to everyone they cared about. A letter that laid bare every moment they'd failed us. Not just this time, but over years. It would be raw, unfiltered, and undeniable. I stayed up late, scribbling in a notebook, my words sharp with pain and truth. I didn't know if it would change them, But it would free me. And maybe, just maybe, it would make them see Ethan not as a burden, but as the beautiful, fragile boy they'd let down. As dawn broke over the lake, I felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't just revenge. It was redemption for me, for Ethan, for the family we deserved. The letter took shape over the next few days. Each word a release, each sentence a reckoning. I wrote in the early mornings, before Ethan woke, the cabin's silence amplifying my thoughts. I didn't hold back. I detailed every slight, every broken promise, how they'd missed my high school graduation for a cruise, how they'd forgotten Ethan's 5th birthday because they were too busy. But the heart of it was this latest betrayal. The way they'd dismissed Ethan's excitement for their time together, choosing a tropical escape over his trust. I wrote about his tears, his questions, the way he'd curled into me at night, seeking reassurance I could barely give. The letter wasn't just an accusation. It was a mirror, forcing them to see the damage they'd caused. I addressed it to them but copied every family member, every friend who'd ever heard them boast about being devoted grandparents. If they wanted to live in denial, I'd make sure the world knew the truth. Ethan and I fell into a rhythm at the cabin. We'd fish in the lake, his small hands fumbling with the rod, his laughter echoing when he caught a tiny perch. I watched him closely, searching for signs of the hurt I knew lingered. He was resilient, but I wasn't fooled. Kids bury pain deep, and I'd learned that from my own childhood. My parents' neglect had shaped me, taught me to crave their approval even when they didn't deserve it. I'd spent years making excuses for them, but no more. Ethan deserved better, and I was determined to give it to him, even if it meant burning bridges. The letter was my torch, and I was ready to set fire to the past. I mailed the letters on the 5th day, my hand steady as I dropped them into the postbox outside the cabin's rental office. There was no turning back now. I imagined my parents' faces when they returned from their vacation, tanned and smug, only to find their mailboxes stuffed with my words. I pictured aunts and uncles reading, their shock turning to disapproval, not of me, but of the parents who'd failed us. The thought brought a grim satisfaction, but it was fleeting. Revenge, I was learning, didn't fill the void. It only sharpened the edges of my grief. Still, I didn't regret it. They'd made their choice, and I'd made mine. Ethan was my priority, and anyone who hurt him was no longer family. Back at the cabin, Ethan asked to call his friend Jake, a classmate he'd grown close to. I listened as he chattered about the fish he'd caught, his voice bright with pride. For a moment, I felt lighter, as if his joy could lift me out of my anger. But then my phone buzzed, a text from my cousin Mark, one of the few who'd reached out after my post. I got your letter. Heavy. I had no idea things were this bad. Can we talk? I stared at the message, torn. Mark had always been kind, but he was still family, still tied to the world I was trying to escape. I texted back a curt, "Not now. I need time." He didn't push, but his message lingered, a crack in my resolve. What if I was wrong to drag everyone into this? What if my need for justice was hurting more than it healed? That night, Ethan had a nightmare. He woke crying, his small body trembling as I held him. "They don't want me," he sobbed, and I knew he meant my parents. I rocked him, whispering that he was loved, that he was enough. But my words felt like bandages on a wound too deep to close. I hated them for this, for making him doubt his worth. As he drifted back to sleep, I made a vow: I'd protect him, no matter the cost. The letter was just the beginning. If they didn't respond, if they didn't own their mistakes, I'd take it further. I'd tell Ethan's story to anyone who'd listen, neighbors, their church group, even the local paper. They'd built a facade of perfect grandparents, and I'd tear it down, brick by brick. The next morning, I woke to an email from my mother. They were back from their trip, and she was furious. "You've gone too far, Emily," she wrote, "spreading lies about us. To the whole family. You're tearing us apart." Lies. The word ignited something in me, a fury so raw it scared me. I wanted to scream that they were the ones who'd torn us apart, that their selfishness had shattered Ethan's trust. But I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed to stay calm, to focus on what came next. I took Ethan for a walk, his hand small in mine, and tried to lose myself in his chatter about bugs and clouds. But my mind was elsewhere, plotting, planning. They thought I'd back down, that I'd forgive and forget like always. They were wrong. Claire called again that evening, her voice hesitant. "Mom's a mess," she said. "She's saying you've ruined their reputation. Dad's not talking to anyone." I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly swallowed by resolve. "They ruined themselves," I said. "They chose a vacation over Ethan. What did they expect?" Claire sighed, and I could hear the strain in her voice. "I know they messed up. But do you have to destroy them? Can't you talk to them?" Talk. I tried talking. I'd begged, explained, pleaded. They hadn't listened. Now they'd face the consequences. I told Claire I wasn't ready to forgive, that I might never be. She didn't argue, but I could feel her pulling away, caught between her loyalty to our parents and her love for me. As the cabin days wound down, I felt a strange clarity. My anger was still there, but it was tempered by purpose. I wasn't just fighting for Ethan, I was fighting for myself, for the girl who'd grown up apologizing for her parents' flaws. The letter had been my first step, but it wouldn't be my last. I started drafting a second one, this time just for my parents. It would be different, not an accusation, but a demand. They'd need to earn their way back into our lives, if that was even possible. I didn't know if they'd try, but I knew one thing: I was done carrying their weight. Ethan and I would build a life without them, a life where he'd never doubt his worth. As I watched him chase fireflies in the dusk, his laughter a fragile melody, I felt a spark of hope. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning. The cabin's quiet was a bomb, but it couldn't erase the storm inside me. Ethan's laughter as he chased fireflies that final evening lingered in my mind, a reminder of what I was fighting for. Back home, reality hit hard. The house felt emptier, the absence of my parents' presence once a constant, however flawed now a void. I unpacked our bags. Ethan's small suitcase stuffed with drawings he'd made at the cabin, each one a glimpse into his heart. One showed a stick-figure family, him, me, and two blurry figures in the distance. "That's Grandma and Grandpa," he'd said, pointing. "They're far away." My throat tightened. He was processing their absence in his own way, and I hated that he had to. I tucked the drawing into a drawer, unable to look at it, and turned my focus to the second letter. This one was harder to write. The first had been fueled by anger, each word a blade. This time, I wanted clarity, not just catharsis. I sat at my desk, the house silent except for the hum of the fridge, and poured my thoughts onto the page. You've lost us, I wrote. Not because of one trip, but because of a lifetime of choosing yourselves. Ethan deserves grandparents who show up, who keep their promises. If you want to be in his life, you'll need to prove you've changed. No apologies. No excuses, just actions. I didn't know if they'd read it, let alone respond, but it felt like a line in the sand. I sealed the envelope, addressed it to their house, and slipped it into my bag. I'd mail it tomorrow, after I'd had time to sleep on it. The next day, Ethan went back to school, his backpack slung over his small shoulders. I watched him board the bus, his wave hesitant, and felt a pang of guilt for the chaos I'd stirred. My post and the first letter had rippled through our family, and I knew he'd hear whispers, classmates' parents talking, teachers giving him sympathetic looks. I tried to shield him, but the truth was messy, and I couldn't undo what I'd started. At work, my colleagues were kind but distant, sensing the weight I carried. My boss called me into her office, her face soft with concern. I heard about your conference cancellation, she said. Is everything okay? I forced a smile, muttered something about family issues, and promised to make up for it. But inside, I was seething not at her, but at my parents, whose selfishness had cost me more than just a trip. That evening, my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. It was my father's voice, low and strained. Emily, we need to talk. I froze, my heart pounding. I hadn't heard from him directly since his curt text. There's nothing to say, I replied, my voice colder than I'd intended. You made your choice. He sighed, the sound heavy with something I couldn't place: regret. Maybe. Or just exhaustion. We didn't mean to hurt Ethan, he said. We didn't think it was a big deal. Not a big deal. I wanted to scream, to list every way they'd let us down. Instead, I said, you don't get to decide what hurts him. You don't get to dismiss his feelings. I hung up, my hands trembling. His call shook me more than I wanted to admit. Was he trying to fix this? Or just save face? The second letter went out the next morning, and I felt a strange calm as I dropped it in the mailbox. It wasn't about revenge, Anna Maria, it was about setting boundaries, about demanding better. But the calm didn't last. By afternoon, my inbox was flooded with messages from relatives. Some supportive, others accusatory. You're being too harsh, wrote my Aunt Linda. They're not perfect, but they're your parents. I deleted her email without responding. I was tired of defending my decision, tired of explaining why Ethan's pain mattered more than their pride. Claire texted, asking to meet. I agreed, reluctantly, and we met at a coffee shop downtown. She looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed. They're sorry, she said, stirring her latte. They didn't realize how much this would hurt you. I laughed. Bitter. They never do. Our conversation was tense. A dance between her loyalty to them and her love for me. She didn't defend their actions, but she pleaded for reconciliation. They're not getting younger, she said. What if you regret this? Her words hit a nerve, but I pushed back. What I'd regret is letting them hurt Ethan again. I said. I'm done giving them chances. She nodded, but I could see the distance growing between us. Claire had always been my ally, but this fight was mine alone. As I drove home, I felt the weight of my choices. Cutting them off wasn't just about protecting Ethan, it was about breaking a cycle. One I'd been trapped in my whole life. That night, Ethan asked about his grandparents again. Are they mad at me? He said, his voice small as he sat on the couch, a book in his lap. I knelt beside him, my heart aching. No, buddy. They're not mad. They just made a mistake. But you and I, we're okay. We've got each other. He nodded, but his eyes were distant, and I knew the wound was still raw. I tucked him into bed, reading his favorite story until his breathing slowed. Then I sat in the dark, my mind racing. The letters, the post, the calls, they were all pieces of a puzzle I was still solving. Justice wasn't enough. I wanted redemption, not just for me, but for Ethan. I wanted him to grow up knowing he was enough, that he didn't need to chase love from people who didn't value him. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about my father's call. His voice had carried something new, vulnerability, maybe, or fear. It didn't erase what they'd done, but it planted a seed of doubt. What if they could change? What if I was wrong to burn everything down? I pushed the thought away, but it lingered, a shadow in the corner of my mind. Tomorrow, I'd focus on Ethan, on rebuilding the trust they'd broken. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. My parents had started this war, but I'd finish it on my terms. For my son. Weeks passed, and the silence from my parents was deafening. No calls. No emails. No sign they'd even read my second letter. I told myself it didn't matter, they'd shown their true colors, and I was done waiting for them to change. But the quiet gnawed at me, a reminder of the family I'd once believed in. Ethan and I settled back into our routine: school, work, soccer practice, but the undercurrent of loss lingered. He didn't ask about his grandparents as often, but I saw it in his eyes, the way he'd pause when we passed their street on the way to the park. It kept him busy, filling our weekends with trips to the zoo, movie nights, anything to keep his mind off the fracture I'd caused. But I couldn't escape it. Every notification on my phone, every knock at the door, carried a flicker of hope or dread that it might be them. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, staying late to make up for the missed conference. My boss noticed, offering me a new assignment that could lead to the promotion I'd been chasing. Felt like a lifeline, a chance to build a better future for Ethan. But even as I smiled and nodded, my mind was elsewhere, tangled in the fallout of my choices. My posts and letters had split the family in two. Some rallied behind me, sending messages of support, while others sided with my parents, calling me vindictive. I ignored the critics, but their words stung. Was I the villain here? tearing apart a family for one mistake. I pushed the doubt down, focusing on Ethan's smile, his trust in me. He was worth it. He had to be. One evening, as I was cooking dinner, the doorbell rang. Ethan ran to answer it, and I followed, my heart lurching when I saw my mother standing there. She looked older, her face lined with something heavier than fatigue, shame, maybe, or regret. "Emily," she said, her voice soft. "Can we talk?" Ethan stared up at her, his eyes wide, and I felt a surge of protectiveness. "Not now," I said, stepping between them. "He's about to eat." Her gaze dropped to Ethan, and for a moment, I saw genuine pain in her eyes. "I just want to see him," she whispered. I shook my head, guiding Ethan back inside. "You don't get to just show up," I said. "Not after what you did." I closed the door, my hands shaking, and turned to Ethan, who looked confused. "Why's Grandma here?" he asked. I forced a smile. "She just stopped by. Buddy. Let's eat." That night, couldn't sleep. My mother's face haunted me, her plea echoing in my mind. Part of me wanted to believe she was sorry, but I'd heard her apologies before, empty words that never led to change. I checked my phone, half expecting a message, but there was nothing. Instead, I found an email from my cousin Mark, forwarded from my mother. It was a draft of a letter she'd written but never sent, addressed to me. "Emily," it began. "I know we hurt you and Ethan. I didn't realize how much until I saw your letter. We were wrong, and I'm sorry." It went on, detailing their regret, their promise to do better. I read it twice, searching for sincerity, but all I could feel was skepticism. Words were cheap. I needed proof. The next day, I called Claire, needing her perspective. She met me at the park, where Ethan played on the swings while we talked. "Mom's been crying every day," she said. "Dad's a wreck, too. They didn't expect you to cut them off completely." I crossed my arms, staring at Ethan as he laughed, carefree for the moment. "They didn't expect consequences," I said. "That's the problem. They've always gotten away with it." Claire nodded, but her eyes were pleading. "They're trying. They want to make it right." I wanted to believe her, but trust was a fragile thing, and mine was shattered. "They can try," I said. "But it's not up to me to fix this. It's on them." Over the next week, small gestures started arriving. A package for Ethan, new art supplies. His favorite with a note from my parents. "We're thinking of you." A letter for me, handwritten, promising to prioritize Ethan if I'd let them back in. I didn't respond, but I kept the letters, stacking them in a drawer. Ethan noticed the gifts, his eyes lighting up, but I saw the hesitation in him, too. "Can I call them?" he asked one night. I swallowed hard, torn between protecting him and letting him hope. "Not yet," I said. "Let's see what they do next." He nodded, trusting me, and I felt the weight of that trust like a stone in my chest. I was his shield, but I didn't know if I was strong enough to carry it. The turning point came unexpectedly. My father showed up at Ethan's soccer game, standing quietly on the sidelines. He didn't approach, didn't wave, just watched. Ethan spotted him, his face a mix of surprise and wariness. After the game, I walked over, my heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice low. He looked at me, his eyes tired but earnest. "I just wanted to see him play," he said. "I won't bother you." He turned to leave, and something in me cracked. "Wait," I said. He stopped, hope flickering in his expression. "This doesn't change anything," I warned. "But Ethan saw you. Don't make him hope for nothing." He nodded, and for the first time, I saw something like humility in him. As I drove Ethan home, he was quiet, processing. "Grandpa came," he said finally. "Does that mean they're sorry?" I gripped the steering wheel, unsure how to answer. "Maybe," I said. "But sorry isn't enough. They have to show it." He nodded, his small face serious, and I realized he was learning from learning how to demand respect, how to protect his heart. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. I poured out my doubts, my fears, my hope that maybe, just maybe, they could change. But I wasn't ready to forgive, not yet. Redemption wasn't a gift I could give. They'd have to earn it, one step at a time. My father's appearance at the soccer game lingered in my mind, a crack in the wall I'd built. I didn't trust it, but I couldn't ignore it either. Ethan talked about it for days, his voice a mix of excitement and caution, as if he was afraid to hope. I watched him closely, searching for signs of the hurt I'd tried so hard to shield him from. He was resilient, but I knew the wounds were there, hidden beneath his smiles. I kept my parents at a distance, responding to their letters with silence. But their efforts continued, small, tentative steps that felt both foreign and infuriating. Card for Ethan. A text asking how he was doing. A package of his favorite cookies. Each gesture chipped away at my resolve. But I held firm. They'd hurt us too deeply for me to let them back in without proof they'd changed. At work, I threw myself into the new project, determined to prove I hadn't lost my edge. My boss praised my focus, but I felt like a fraud, hiding the chaos of my personal life behind a polished exterior. Every night, I came home to Ethan, his questions about his grandparents growing more frequent. "Why can't we see them?" he asked one evening, his eyes searching mine. I knelt beside him, choosing my words carefully. "They need to show us they're sorry, buddy. Not just with words, but with actions." He nodded, but I could see the confusion in his face, the longing for the family we'd lost. I hated that I couldn't give him answers, that I couldn't fix this for him. Claire reached out again, this time with a proposition. "They want to meet," she said over coffee, her voice cautious. "Just you, me, and them. No pressure, just a chance to talk." I stared into my cup, the steam curling up like my doubts. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep the wall up. But another part, the part that remembered family dinners. My mother's laugh. My father's rare smiles, wanted to believe they could change. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Claire's face lit up, but I warned her not to get her hopes up. "This isn't forgiveness," I said. It's a conversation. She nodded, but I could see the hope in her eyes. And it scared me. Hope was dangerous. It made you vulnerable. The meeting happened a week later, at a neutral Spoda quiet diner downtown. I arrived early. My stomach knotted, and sat in a corner booth, watching the door. My parents walked in, looking smaller than I remembered, their faces lined with worry. My mother's eyes were red. My father's shoulders slumped. Claire sat beside me, a buffer between us. "Thank you for coming," my mother said, her voice trembling. I didn't respond, just nodded, waiting. They apologized haltingly at first, then with more conviction. "We didn't realize how much we hurt Ethan," my father said. "We were selfish. We see that now." I wanted to believe them, but the words felt like echoes of promises they'd broken before. "You didn't just hurt Ethan," I said, my voice steady. "You hurt me. You've been doing it my whole life." The diner grew quiet, the weight of my words settling between us. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "We want to make this right," she said, tears spilling over. "Tell us how." I leaned forward, my voice low. "You don't get to decide what right looks like. You show up for Ethan. You keep your promises. You prove you're different." My father nodded, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. "We'll try," he said. "We'll do whatever it takes." I didn't trust them, but I saw something in their faces I hadn't seen before: humility. Maybe. Or fear of losing us for good. I agreed to let them see Ethan, but with conditions: supervised visits. No promises they couldn't keep. And no pretending this was fixed. The first visit was at our house, a Saturday afternoon. Ethan was nervous, clinging to my side as my parents arrived. They brought a puzzle, his favorite kind, and sat with him on the living room floor. I watched from the kitchen, my heart in my throat. They were gentle, attentive, asking him about school, listening to his stories. Ethan warmed to them slowly, his laughter hesitant but real. When they left, he hugged them, and I felt a pang of something I couldn't name: relief. Maybe. Or the ghost of hope. But I didn't let my guard down. I'd seen them play the part before, only to slip back into old habits. This time, I'd be watching. Over the next few weeks, they kept showing up: small, consistent acts that surprised me. My father came to another soccer game, cheering from the sidelines. My mother called to ask about Ethan's art projects, remembering details I hadn't expected her to care about. Each gesture felt like a step, but I wasn't ready to call it progress. I kept their visits short, their interactions monitored. Ethan was happier, but I saw the caution in him, too. The way he held back, waiting for them to disappoint him again. It broke my heart, but it also made me proud. He was learning to protect himself, just as I was. One night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he asked, "Are they really sorry?" I brushed his hair back, searching for the right words. "I think they are," I said. "But we're allowed to take our time. We don't have to trust them until we're ready." He nodded, his eyes heavy with sleep, and I realized I was talking to myself as much as to him. Redemption wasn't a straight line, it was a process. one we were navigating together. As I turned off his light, I felt a flicker of peace. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the possibility of it. For the first time, I let myself imagine a future where my parents could be part of our lives not as they were, but as they might become. The tentative truce with my parents felt fragile, like walking on a frozen lake, waiting for the ice to crack. They kept showing up weekly visits, small gifts for Ethan, calls to check in. I watched every move, searching for signs of the selfishness I'd grown up with. But they surprised me. My mother started asking about Ethan's drawings. Not just nodding along but really listening. Asking him to explain the stories behind each one. My father took him to the park, teaching him how to kick a soccer ball with a patience I didn't know he had. Ethan began to relax around them, his smiles less guarded, his laughter more frequent. I wanted to believe this was real, but doubt clung to me like a shadow. I'd spent a lifetime forgiving their failures, and I wasn't ready to let go of my armor. At work, I was killing it. The new project landed me the promotion I'd been chasing. A raise that meant more stability for Ethan and me. My colleagues threw a small celebration, and for a moment, I felt like the woman I'd always wanted to be strong, capable, in control. But at home, the weight of my family's fracture returned. Ethan's happiness with his grandparents was a double-edged sword. It gave me hope but also fear. What if they let him down again? What if I was wrong to let them back in? I confided in Claire one night, over wine at her place. I don't know if I can trust them, I said, swirling my glass. She leaned forward, her eyes soft. You don't have to. Not yet. Just let Ethan have this, and see where it goes. Her words stayed with me, a reminder that this wasn't just about Might, was about him. One afternoon, my parents asked to take Ethan to a local art fair, a place he'd been begging to go. I hesitated, my instinct to say no warring with the progress I'd seen. I'll come with you, I said finally. They didn't argue, and for that, I was grateful. The fair was crowded, alive with color and music, and Ethan's eyes lit up as he darted between booths, clutching my mother's hand. My father hung back, watching us with a quiet intensity. At one point, he pulled me aside. Emily, he said, his voice low. I know we don't deserve your trust, but we're trying. For Ethan. For you. I looked at him, searching for the man who'd dismissed me so easily. But all I saw was a father who seemed, for once, to understand the stakes. Keep trying, I said, and walked away, my heart a tangle of hope and caution. That night, Ethan couldn't stop talking about the fair, how Grandma had bought him a sketchbook, how Grandpa had laughed at his jokes. I listened, my chest tight with a mix of pride and fear. He was healing, but I wasn't there yet. I still carried the weight of their betrayal, the memory of Ethan's tears when they'd chosen a vacation over him. I wrote in my journal, trying to sort through my feelings. I want to believe they've changed. I wrote, but I'm scared. Scared they'll hurt him again. Scared I'll lose the strength to protect him. The words felt like a confession, a release of the fear I couldn't voice to anyone else. A week later, my mother called, her voice nervous. We'd like to have Ethan over for a weekend, she said. Just us. We'll follow your rules. Whatever you need. My first instinct was to refuse. But I thought of Ethan's laughter. His growing trust. I agreed. But with conditions, daily check-ins. No surprises. And I'd pick him up if anything felt off. They agreed without hesitation. And I felt a flicker of respect for their willingness to meet me halfway. Dropping Ethan off that Saturday was one of the hardest things I'd done. He hugged me tight, his backpack slung over his shoulder. And I whispered, "You're my everything. Call me if you need me." He nodded, and I drove away, my hands shaking on the wheel. The weekend was a test not just for them, but for me. I spent it restless, checking my phone, waiting for Ethan's calls. He sounded happy, telling me about baking cookies with Grandma, playing chess with Grandpa. When I picked him up Sunday evening, he ran to me, his face glowing. "It was so fun, Mom," he said, and I hugged him tight, relief flooding me. My parents stood in the doorway, watching us. "Thank you," my mother said, her voice thick with emotion. I nodded, unable to say more. Driving home, Ethan chattered about his weekend, and I felt the ice in my heart begin to thaw, not completely, but enough to let a sliver of light through. Back home, I sat with Ethan as he showed me the drawings he'd made at their house. One was of the four of us, me, him, my parents standing together, smiling. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice small. I kissed his forehead, tears stinging my eyes. "It's perfect, buddy." That night, I wrote another letter to my parents. Not to mail, but for myself. "I'm starting to believe you," I wrote. "But I'm still watching. Don't make me regret this." I tucked it away, a reminder of the boundary I'd set. The trust one was cautiously rebuilding. As I lay in bed, I thought about redemption, not just theirs, but mine. I'd spent so long fighting for justice, for Ethan's heart, that I'd forgotten to fight for my own. Letting them back in, even a little, was a risk, but it was also a step toward healing. Not for them, but for me. For the woman who'd carried her parents' failures for too long. For the mother who'd do anything to see her son smile. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, I felt like I could walk hand in hand with Ethan, with or without them. The months that followed were a delicate dance, each step testing the fragile trust we'd begun to rebuild. My parents kept their word, showing up for Ethan in ways I hadn't expected. They attended his school play, clapping louder than anyone when he took his bow as a tree in the background. They called him weekly, asking about his drawings, his soccer games, his dreams. I watched from the sidelines, my heart caught between gratitude and wariness. Ethan was thriving, his laughter brighter, his questions about their absence fading. But I couldn't shake the fear that this was temporary, that they'd slip back into their old ways. I'd built a life for Ethan and me that didn't need them, and I wasn't ready to let that go. At work, my promotion brought new responsibilities, long hours that left me drained but proud. Ethan and I had more breathing room financially, and I started planning a trip for USA real vacation. Just the two of us, to make up for the one I'd canceled. I told him over dinner, his eyes lighting up at the idea of a beach adventure. "Can Grandma and Grandpa come?" he asked, and I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. I hadn't considered inviting them. Hadn't wanted to. Maybe next time, I said. And he nodded. But I saw the flicker of disappointment in his eyes. It stung. But I wasn't ready to share our world with them completely. Not yet. Claire became my sounding board. The only one who understood the tightrope I was walking. We met for lunch one day, and I admitted how hard it was to trust again. They're trying, she said, her voice gentle. But I get why you're scared. They've let you down before. I nodded, grateful for her honesty. It's not just about me anymore, I said. It's about Ethan. If they hurt him again, I don't know if I can forgive myself for letting them back in. Claire reached for my hand, squeezing it. You're a great mom. He's lucky to have you. Her words stayed with me, a reminder that I was doing this for him, not for them. One evening, my mother asked if they could host a family dinner, just the four of us. I hesitated, memories of their betrayal still sharp. But Ethan's excitement tipped the scale. We arrived at their house, the familiar scent of my mother's cooking hitting me like a wave of nostalgia. Ethan ran to hug them, and I stood back, watching as they enveloped him in warmth. Dinner was quiet at first, the weight of our history heavy in the air. But then Ethan started telling a story about his soccer game. And my parents listened, really listened, their faces alive with interest. I felt something shift in minute forgiveness. Not yet, but a softening. A willingness to see them as they were now, not as they'd been. After dinner, my father pulled me aside. Emily, he said, his voice rough. I know we can't undo what we did, but we're trying to be better. For Ethan. For you. I looked at him, searching for the man who'd dismissed me so easily. But he wasn't there. In his place was someone older, humbler, someone who seemed to understand the cost of his choices. I see that, I said finally. But it's going to take time. He nodded, and for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page, not allies, but not enemies either. Ethan's 9th birthday was approaching, and my parents asked to help plan it. I agreed, but with strict boundaries, no surprises. No overpromising. They threw themselves into it, coordinating with me on every detail. A superhero-themed party at the park, complete with a cake shaped like Spider-Man's mask. Watching them set up, laughing with Ethan as they hung streamers, I felt a pang of hope. The party was a success. Ethan's face glowing as he blew out his candles. My parents cheering beside me. For a moment, we felt like a family again. But as I watched them hug him, I reminded myself to stay grounded. This was a start, not a finish line. That night, I sat with Ethan as he sorted through his birthday gifts. He held up a drawing he'd made for my parents, a picture of us all together. Can we give it to them? He asked. I nodded, my throat tight. Sure, buddy. He smiled, and I saw the boy he was becoming, strong, kind, forgiving in ways I wasn't sure I could be. Later, I wrote in my journal, reflecting on the day. They're trying, I wrote. And maybe that's enough for now. But I'm still watching. For Ethan. For me. The words felt like a promise. A reminder of the boundaries I'd set. The love I'd protect at all costs. As I tucked Ethan into bed, He whispered, "I'm glad they came, Mom." I kissed his forehead, my heart full. "Me too," I said, and I meant it not because I trusted them completely, but because I saw the joy they brought him. Redemption was a slow burn, not a sudden blaze, and I was learning to live with that. For Ethan, keep the door open, but I'd never stop guarding it. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I felt like I could face it not just as a mother, but as a woman who'd found her strength. Ethan's birthday marked a turning point, but not an ending. My parents' efforts continued, steady and deliberate, like they were rebuilding a house brick by brick. They showed up for his soccer games, sent thoughtful gifts, called just to talk. I watched, always watching, for the moment they'd falter. But they didn't. Not yet. Ethan's trust in them grew, his smiles easier, his hugs less hesitant. I wanted to match his openness, but my heart was slower to mend. I'd spent too long carrying their failures, and forgiveness felt like a risk I wasn't ready to take. Still, I let them in, step by cautious step, for Ethan's sake. His happiness was my compass, guiding me through the fog of my doubts. At work, my new role consumed me, but it also gave me purpose. The raise meant I could save for Ethan's future college. Maybe. Or that beach trip we'd planned. I booked it for the summer. A week in Florida. Just the two of us. When I told Ethan, he grinned, then paused. "Can we invite Grandma and Grandpa?" He asked again. This time, I didn't deflect. "Let's see how things go," I said, and his nod told me he understood. He was learning, just as I was. That trust was earned, not given. I was proud of him, of the strength he was building, but it broke my heart that he'd had to learn it so young. Claire and I grew closer, her role as mediator fading as we found our way back to being sisters. She admitted she'd struggled with my decision to cut our parents off. But she understood now. "You were protecting Ethan," she said one night, over takeout at my place. "I get it. I just hope you can find some peace." Peace. The word felt foreign, but I was starting to feel its edges moments when Ethan laughed. When I saw my parents try, really try, to be better. I didn't trust them fully, but I was learning to live with the possibility that they could change. Claire hugged me before she left, and I held on a little longer, grateful for her steadiness in the storm I'd created. One afternoon, my parents asked to take Ethan to a museum, a place he'd been obsessed with since a school trip. I agreed, but insisted on coming along. We walked through exhibits, Ethan's voice echoing as he explained dinosaur facts to my father, who listened with a focus I hadn't seen in years. My mother caught my eye, her smile tentative, and I offered a small one back. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something a crack in the wall I'd built. Later, as we sat in the museum cafe, Ethan drew in his sketchbook while my parents and I talked. Not about the past, but about him, his passions, his dreams. For the first time, I felt like we were building something new, not just repairing what was broken. That evening, Ethan gave them the drawing he'd made for his birthday family. Together, my mother's eyes filled with tears as she hugged him, and my father's hand trembled as he took it. "We'll keep this forever," he said, and I believed him. Not because I trusted them completely, but because I saw the weight of their promise. The fear of losing us again. Driving home, Ethan was quiet, his sketchbook clutched to his chest. "Are we a family again?" he asked, his voice soft. I reached for his hand, squeezing it. "We're getting there," I said. "But you and I, we're always a family. No matter what." He smiled, and I felt a warmth I hadn't in months. I wrote in my journal that night, the words flowing easier now. "They're trying," I wrote. "And maybe that's enough. Not to erase what happened, but to build something new. For Ethan. For me." I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, consumed by anger, ready to burn everything down. I was still angry, but it was softer now, tempered by hope. Not blind hope, but the kind that came from seeing change. From watching my parents fight for Ethan's trust. Redemption wasn't a destination, it was a journey. And we were all on it. Stumbling but moving forward. The Florida trip came, and I didn't invite my parents. It was ours. Ethan's and mine. A celebration of the life we'd built. We built sandcastles, chased waves, laughed until our sides hurt. On the last night, as we watched the sunset, Ethan leaned against me. "I'm happy, Mom," he said, and I kissed his head, tears in my eyes. "Me too, buddy." Back home, my parents didn't push, didn't guilt me for leaving them out. They just kept showing up small, steady steps that were starting to feel like a foundation. Looking back, I realized this wasn't just about them. It was about letting go of the girl who'd carried her parents' failures. About becoming the mother Ethan deserved. I'd cut them off to protect him, but I'd also found my own strength, my own voice. The letters, the post, the silence, they were my rebellion, my refusal to let their selfishness define us. Now, as I watched Ethan grow, as I saw my parents try, I felt something new, not just justice, but grace. Not for them, but for me. For the family we were becoming. One careful step at a time.